All right, so hi everyone. Thanks for joining for our first episode in Crypto Chronicles, brought to you by Lifestone Insights. We try to create a different series that explores Bitcoin, all the cryptocurrencies out there to help you better understand them and also better understand their movements in order for you to make educated decisions. So today we have two of my closest friends who are analysts at LSI. We have Marco and Arthur. And I guess we can start by introducing ourselves. Maybe you can tell us where are you currently in the world and a little bit about yourselves. So Marco, do you want to go first?
Sure, Bogdan. So, hi, my name is Marco Darshun. I'm currently in quarantine in Hong Kong. So, in the hotel quarantine, it's been going okay. I'm a first year master finance student, schema business school in Paris, which is why I'm in quarantine because I was in Paris beforehand and arriving back in Hong Kong. I'm also an analyst for the Crypto Chronicles, but also for the politics review for LSI.
Hey guys, I'm Arthur Herbert. So I go to Bath Uni, second year economics student. And what really got me into cryptocurrencies, apart from obviously the high returns, is definitely how new the space is. For me, I'd sort of say it's kind of what's really interesting for me is how when the stock exchange sort of went electronic, I'd say the era we're in right now, with the birth of cryptocurrencies, it's so new and exciting. I just couldn't not get involved.
Sounds good. So pretty much the purpose of our first episode is to explore the relationship between blockchain and Bitcoin, and we entitled it as a love story. So right now, I just want to ask you also, Marco, just because I think Arthur already touched on it. What got you in crypto?
Oh, that's a good question. So the first time I actually heard about cryptocurrencies was actually in 2017, just before the classic 17K crash. And one of my friends was really interested about it. He's like, hey, Marco, like, dude, it's super interesting. You should have a look. He explained to me blockchain, the technology behind it. I was like, yeah, it's quite good. But, at that time, I wasn't really into like all the finance stuff because I was, before doing my finance degree, I was actually studying political science and international relations. So very, very different from, the world of cryptocurrencies, CZ, etc. So despite having some understanding of it, I was like, you know what, it's interesting, but it's not really like my cup of tea. So, maybe I'll do that later. And that actually happened 2 years later. For some really weird reason, I started looking at lots of videos about it, started doing my own research. And then last year, and exactly a year ago, I bought a bit of Bitcoin after the crash. That's where you were able to actually buy a one Bitcoin for almost $3,000, which was a really good deal. And obviously, since then, the rest is history, right?
No, 100%. I guess like for me, Bitcoin and all the cryptocurrencies was like a foreign discipline, just because I'm more of a like value investor. I know more about equities and investments in that sort of sense. So that's why I guess it's great to learn a little bit more about crypto, just because everyone has taken notice of it, like from all the banks to like the retail traders. So yeah, Marco, Arthur, sorry, do you want to add anything on that, or can I explain?
Do you mind just saying that question again? Sorry, my Wi-Fi just cut out.
Yeah, for sure. So what got you into crypto?
So as I was saying earlier, the returns. So I started trading just less than a year ago, and that was after my internship with Amplify. And I was super interested in equities, but I just wasn't really like making high enough returns for what I really wanted to do. And that's when a mate told me about cryptocurrencies. I guess you could say it all sort of started with ADA, which is the Cardano project, which I'm sure is something we'll definitely get onto later on in the series. But that's where it all started. And as I started to learn more and more about this technology, especially blockchain and how it's implemented and stuff, I thought how interesting this whole space was and how new it was. And considering how our sort of world as we know it is moving to the digital, everything's being accelerated to become digitalized. I just wanted to get involved, and especially with cryptocurrencies.
Sounds good. Well, I guess right now we cannot ignore them, so I guess everyone wants to get into them. Therefore, it's important to be educated in that sort of sense. So today we're just going to talk about money, the history of money, and of course, blockchain, Bitcoin, and pretty much we're going to have some closing remarks and tell you a little bit about what we plan to cover in the next episodes. So if Bitcoin is money, then I guess it's advisable to ask, what is money? And I guess like any one of you can take that, guys.
So this is a really good question. And basically money, the characteristics of money are three things. One of them is the medium of exchange, the other is the store of value, and the last thing is the unit of account. Obviously, none of the money are able to actually represent all the three dimensions, and they all present different trade-offs. For the medium of exchange parts, what is actually very important is that it's how easy it is for a currency to be exchanged for products and services. And the medium of exchange has also its characteristics. The first one being durability, which is basically saying how easily it is replaceable if it's damaged, and also how long it can actually last. The second one is being transportability. Makes sense, how can you transport that money from one location to the other? Third one is just divisibility, how you can actually divide it into different smaller values. Fungibility is the fourth one, about how it can, accept how the value is undistinguishable from one another. And the last one is how the non-counterfeitability of it. And so how it is, how the actual money that you have, how hard it is to actually create a fake money, and how you can actually separate it. If you're able to actually create that fake money, what are the differentiations between the fake and the real ones? And so you can actually see those characteristics in the medium of exchange. And those characteristics of the medium of exchange by itself can be all relatable to Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies.
And there's also something else. So with money in general, another determining factor of money is its unit of account. So in short, it is the standard monetary unit of measurement of values for goods and services. But I guess you could say in plain English that prices are quoted in terms of money rather than other goods. So if I were to go to the pub and buy a pint, I wouldn't give the barman, potatoes and stuff. I'd actually have something to give him. So in general, we would say a good unit of account is stable and doesn't suffer from the effects of inflation, which tends to destroy the basic stability of money. And a final factor for money is definitely its store of value, which quite literally means what it says on the tin. So a store of value is essentially a mechanism by which wealth can be saved and retrieved in the future. But the key thing here is with some predictability about its future value. So look at gold, for example. We would regard gold as the ultimate safe haven asset, since its store of value doesn't deteriorate in an economic crisis, and it's always in demand and it's easily convertible. And arguably, some cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin are starting to be considered as a store of value with similar characteristics to gold, but with extra stuff as well.
Oh, for sure. Thanks for that. This reminds me actually of a movie that I saw, highly recommend to anyone. I think it's on Netflix as well, The Laundromat. That starts with the history of money as well, like whenever people were doing like exchanges with different products and stuff like that. But I was wondering, guys, why are cryptocurrencies important in the history of money in general?
And that is actually a very good question. And to really understand, the cryptocurrencies within the history of money, we need to actually have a good understanding of, of the history of money by itself. And so, how did individuals were able to actually use any good or anything that they actually received to be able to use it as an exchange, but to exchange to other people through commerce and trade. And so the first thing that actually happened was through barter. So bartering is basically the concept where you use something, I would say like something such as a shell, a cattle, teas, grain, and tobacco. And that was kind of considered the historical primitive money. And so they use this and give it and exchange a shell with a cattle, teeth was a grain, a tobacco was something else. And despite this actually being okay during those primitive periods, it did bring up one of the biggest problems, which is the double coincidence of want. So the double coincidence of want is where, for example, how is the value of a shell compared to a grain going to be later on in a later exchange? For example, if you're someone that's actually using a shell to exchange the cattle, and how are you going to be able to receive the same value from a seller, from a buyer trying to buy the exact same thing that you were able to receive from the bartering? And so that creates a process that is very confusing, such as what I'm explaining right now, and basically, destroying the actual value itself. And so that created they should be behind the double coins at once. Therefore, later on, humans had to through different kind of technology, they were able to form the first coinage. And the first coinage was invented in China in 1200 BC with what we call metal carries Banlian coins. Despite having some sort of success behind it, it was a bit difficult because you had the issue of debasement. And debasement is something very important that will be coming back over and over again during all our conversation, because it's probably the most important thing about basically the value and why money suffers the lack of value later on in life. And so debasement is basically the reduction in quantity of valuable metals and coins in that instance. And because of commodity metals, because of value of different commodity metals, they had to debase the money with metals that were less valuable than the original metal. And so, for example, you had a metal in gold, a coin in gold, but because gold was very hard to produce, they had to later on use silver. And so silver and gold coin didn't have the same value. And so they were always debasing and decreasing the actual value of the coin. And so that goes back to something very important called the Gresham's law, where bad money drives out good money. And as I said, it's basically people trying to hold good money and spend the bad money until there's no good money in the actual system. After that, we had what we call paper currency, which also came in China in the 10th century. This allowed people with receipts of deposits of coin currency, allowing people to deposit their coin at government authorized deposit shops and use those receipts or paper money to trade easily. And that created the first concept of the monopoly of creating money, and then later on leading to national currencies. Then if you fast forward, different years later, we go to the end of World War II with the Bretton Woods system, where they basically had a quasi-gold system where the US dollar was pegged for gold at $25 per ounce. That would create basically a system where most economies would basically regulate the financial flow, the currency, etc., with the fixed exchange rate pegged directly with the US dollars, and basically pegged with the gold system. And that created a very, I would say, stable system. Unfortunately, and that will be very important later on, that actually, they basically unpegged it in 1971 under Richard Nixon because of the Cold War, and especially because of the Vietnam War. And that allowed the US dollar to basically print money, resign restraints, with the sole value of the money of the US dollar being on the belief of the people buying the currency. And that is very, very important. And so coming back to the debasement of the currency, that led to the hyperinflation, which we all kind of know about. And the hyperinflation is basically, having a money supply that is basically uncontrollable through overprinting and to meet their obligations. And so one of the best examples is the hyperinflation in Weimar Germany in 1923, because of Germany having to pay the reparations of World War I after Versailles Treaty by printing the marks to be able to buy the foreign currency, because basically their own currency then lack the trust and have the actual value. That totally destroyed the mark, made it totally untradable. And because of that, increase of prices, increase of wages, and just destroyed the actual stability of goods and services. Obviously, there's all other examples of it. You have post-war Hungary, Mugabe, Zimbabwe, and recently we have Venezuela. And all of this, the concept of the debasement of money led to cryptocurrencies. And so why are cryptocurrencies very important is because they create this kind of inflation avoidance. They fight against the lack of intrinsic value in a currency. They have lower fees, they facilitate trade, they have the mutual exchange of credit, and they, what I would call, have the digital kind of thing, which is very popular with people these days. And so the last point I want to talk is obviously the difference between money and currency. I kind of use it interchangeably, but they actually have a big difference. And the difference between money and currency is that money is the actual value that is traded for goods and services, where currency is the paper money or coin that carries the day-to-day payment. Therefore, currency cannot be a store value, except the USD these days. But that's because the USD is the currency that is basically represents the security in the world, and therefore people considering that. But if people lose the trust in it, then it loses its value, and therefore currency does not have intrinsic value and can only be serve as a medium exchange.
This is quite interesting, Marco, just because right now I guess everyone fears inflation with the yields of the bonds rising and stuff like that. But I guess like it's important to understand that like the US dollar was pegged to the dollar, which was ages ago, and now that being like a free floating currency has its advantages and disadvantages. But I guess you mentioned there are cryptocurrencies, and I guess the most popular